Is a YouTube broadcast started?
Right, good morning everybody. Welcome along to today's Planning and Right of Way Committee meeting. I'm Councillor Richard Butler, the Chairman of the committee, and welcome. Also with us today, other members are Councillor Creamer, who's my Vice Chairman, Councillor Adams, Allen, Camilleri, Corden, Henshaw, Meakin, Moxon, Owen, Purdue Horan, Helen Ann Smith and Sam Smith. And we welcome our returning member, Councillor Moxon, and welcome Councillor Adams as well. So item 1 on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting. Those of us who were here, are we happy to accept those? Yeah. Thank you very much. And item 2 is apologies for absence, please. So, Mr. Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Allen replaces Councillor Fielding, who may be late, but is just on time. And Helen Ann Smith replaces Councillor Williamson, both for this meeting only. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members or officers present have any disclosable pecuniary interest to declare? And or any members or officers present have any private interest, pecuniary or non-pecuniary, to declare? I suspect not. And also, just talking of officers, maybe it might just be helpful just to have an introduction from officers so everyone knows who is here. So, Mr. Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Jonathan Smith. I'm the team manager of the Development Management team. Just to let you know as well, joining us virtually, we've got Debbie Ragg, who is the case officer for the Banticock Quarry application, and also Daniel Sullivan is here from Highways Development Control in respect of the application at Eastleek.
And I'm David Marsh. I'm the Major Projects Senior Practitioner. Thank you.
And I'm Tim Turner. I'm Senior Practitioner Monitoring Enforcement.
Thank you very much. Item 4, declarations of lobbying. Do any members present have any instances of lobbying to declare? Councillor Owen.
Yes, I've had an email from a resident concerning the Eastleek School site application.
Thank you very much. I was also going to mention that I have also received, in fact, I've received 2 emails from borough councillors in connection with the Eastleek School application, Councillor Thomas and a Councillor Ray, and I think officers have received those emails as well, so the points that are raised will be covered, but primarily I will just mention that Councillor Thomas has asked for clarification in some capacity figures in paragraph 53 of the report, which I'm sure will be covered, and Councillor Ray raised comments about welcoming in the school, but also just raising points about traffic, a question about solar panels and energy, and a query about land, all of which I'm sure will be covered in the discussion and debate. So we'll move on to our first application, which is the proposed southern extension of the Banticock Quarry. I formally move the recommendations on page 149 of the agenda pack. Have I got a seconder, please?
Yes, formally second and reserve the right to speak, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Creamer. And so, Mr. Smith, please, if you'd like to talk us through this.
Thank you, Chair. This report considers a planning application for the extraction of approximately 5 million tonnes of gypsum from a southern extension to Banticock Quarry over a period of 15 years, with restoration to nature conservation and arable farmland. The application also seeks an extension to the time limit for the completion of mineral working within the existing quarry from the end of December 2029 to the end of December 2044, and amendments to the approved restoration scheme. The quarry is located around 5 kilometres southeast of Newark and presently covers an area of around 240 hectares. The proposed southern extension area covers a further 150 hectares and comprises the land to the south of the dotted line on this plan. The settlements of Cottam, Fernwood and Balderton are located close by, and the A1 runs adjacent to the eastern boundary of the site, with Grange Lane running along the western boundary. At the present time, the operators are working in a northerly direction, extracting gypsum in cut 17, heading towards the northern extent of permitted reserves. The approximate extent of the extraction area in the north of the site is highlighted by the red line on this aerial photo. Ahead of mineral extraction, overburden is being removed, with any soil stripping done under archaeological supervision. This photo also shows the main access road into the quarry on the left, and above that, the adjacent Jericho works where the specialist plaster manufacturing plant is located. Based on present rates of extraction, permitted reserves are expected to be exhausted by around 2024-25. This application therefore proposes a southern extension to the quarry, which would allow for the extraction of around 5 million tonnes of high-grade gypsum at a rate of around 400,000 tonnes per annum, equating to 15 years production. These following aerial photos show the southern extension site in its present arable use. This photo shows the northern extent of the southern extension, with Grange Lane on the left. This photo shows a similar area with the quarry workings in the distance. And the next two photos show the eastern part of the extension. And finally, this photo shows the southern extent of the southern extension, although this area would not be worked. Instead, it will be subject to some advanced habitat creation, namely 7.6 hectares of wildflower meadow and 4.6 hectares of native woodland. Extraction will commence in the northwestern corner of the extension area and progress in a southerly direction before working the final cuts on the eastern side. Each of the 15 cuts represents around a year's worth of mineral extraction. Soils from the initial cuts will be placed in perimeter bunds around the site, and initial overburden will be excavated and used to infill previously worked phases in the north of the site. Soils, overburden and interburden extracted from later cuts would be used to infill previously worked areas in the southern extension. The ratio of gypsum to overburden is approximately 1 tonne of gypsum to 10.5 cubic metres of overburden. Gypsum would be extracted using strict mining techniques through one cut at a time. Most of the overburden, interburden and gypsum can be extracted using excavators, but as is the case at present, some of the gypsum seams will be extracted using traditional quarrying methods of drill and blast. If you watch the video now, you've just seen an example of a blast taking place at the quarry. We videoed that when some of the members went to site a few months ago. So the blasting involves using explosive charges placed into a series of shot holes which would be drilled into the gypsum seams. Blasting would continue to take place only between the hours of 1:30 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. Mondays to Fridays. The application also seeks to retain the processing site, associated facilities and access road whilst the southern extension is being worked. The processing plant breaks the gypsum into various sizes and also screens out any other materials such as clays in order to increase the purity of the gypsum. The application does not seek to amend the existing hours of operation at the site, which are set out on this slide. Furthermore, the number of HGVs entering and leaving the site would not change compared to existing levels. At the present time, around 85,000 tonnes of the gypsum is transported to the adjacent Jericho works, with the remainder, around 315,000 tonnes, transported by road to the applicant's other sites at East Leek, Barrow-on-Soar in Leicestershire and Fold in Staffordshire. This slide shows the existing approved restoration scheme for the north of the site, which seeks to create a mix of habitats including wildflower meadow, wet grassland, shingle marginal habitat, reed beds and aquatic planting, new hedgerow, scrub, woodland and wet woodland planting, and a large water body. Some land will be returned to agricultural use. The proposed restoration scheme, incorporating the southern extension, would reflect these habitat types over a larger area. This slide also includes details of the amount of each habitat type to be created. A number of footpaths are proposed, along with a viewing point over the main lake in the south of the site. The application has been subject to a wide-ranging consultation and publicity, not only with when the application was first submitted, but also on two further occasions when additional information was submitted in support of the application. Whilst Newark Town Council and Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust have raised objections to the application, all of the consultees have raised no objections. Only 3 letters of objection have been received from members of the public, and details of their concerns are set out in the report. Regarding the assessment of the application, a key consideration is the great weight that the NPPF attaches to mineral extraction, including to the economy. Banticock is one of only 2 locations in the county where gypsum is extracted, and 2 of the seams are of the very highest quality, and Banticock is the only location in the UK where these seams are mined. Gypsum extraction has been in decline since the mid-1990s due to the production of synthetic gypsum, or desulfur gypsum, as part of the flue gas desulfurization process at coal-fired power stations. However, with the phasing out of coal-fired power stations, the need for primary gypsum has again started to increase. With existing permitted reserves soon to be exhausted, consideration has been given to the advice in the NPPF, which requires mineral planning authorities to plan for a steady and adequate supply of industrial minerals. To this end, a southern extension, albeit one slightly larger than the area which forms this planning application, is allocated in the Minerals Local Plan under Policy MP7 and will provide this steady and adequate supply and give the applicant the security of supply to continue investing in the site and the adjacent Jericho works. The planning application and accompanying environmental statement have been assessed in detail. There will be some minor to moderate adverse landscape impacts, largely due to the scale of the proposals. These impacts will become minor to moderate beneficial following the restoration of the site. Perimeter soil bunds would help reduce the visual impacts of the development, which will be further aided by the fact that much of the development would take place below ground level. As stated earlier, the number of HGVs accessing and leaving the site would not change, but will continue for a further 15 years. What is anticipated to change from around mid-2023 onwards is that the Newark Southern Relief Road is expected to be completed, and the applicant has confirmed that this will be the preferred route for HGVs to use when transporting gypsum to their other sites such as East Leek. This will remove HGVs from existing routes, including the C3 road which travels south to the A52 at Elton. A number of nearby sensitive receptors, both residential and ecological, including Balderston Grange Farm shown on this slide with the quarry on the right, have been assessed in terms of their potential to be impacted by noise and emissions to air. But subject to a number of recommended conditions, it is considered that these impacts can be controlled to acceptable levels. The impacts of blasting, a matter of concern to some local residents, have also been assessed, and it is considered that vibration and air overpressure can be kept within acceptable levels, as has been the case in the past, and existing blast monitoring conditions will be carried forward as part of any new planning permission. The existing programme of archaeological works on site would continue into the southern extension. An extensive area of complex Iron Age and Romano-British cultural heritage landscape have been recorded, building up a valuable record of settlement in the area. Whilst the area is a non-designated heritage asset, it is considered to be as important as a scheduled monument. In light of what has already been discovered, a research-led mitigation strategy through a research framework and agenda and an archaeological management plan is to be undertaken which maximises information gain and delivers public benefit. Written schemes of investigation would be undertaken for each phase of working. 2 isolated farmsteads, both non-designated heritage assets, have also been considered in the application, but the scale of harm to these assets is considered to be less than substantial. In terms of ecological impacts, there is a dry section of the Shire Dyke local wildlife site which will be lost to quarrying, but another section of dry ditch will be enhanced in mitigation. Significant amounts of new ditches would also be created, specifically designed to attract water vole. The southern extension is largely arable, albeit with hedgerows, and nearly 3 kilometres of new species-rich hedgerows would be planted as part of the restoration scheme. The ecological value of the proposed restoration scheme has been calculated using the government's biodiversity net gain metric. This has been done to demonstrate that there will be a net gain in biodiversity from the existing approved restoration scheme to the new restoration scheme incorporating the southern extension. It has also been useful in terms of assessing the application against the biodiversity-led restoration policies in the Minerals Local Plan, which seek to maximise biodiversity gains. In particular, officers have sought to ensure that the aftercare periods for each habitat type is sufficient to ensure that each habitat reaches a good condition. Therefore, a 30-year aftercare period will be required for the areas of woodland planting, 20 years for the shingle marginal habitat, and 15 years for all other habitats. Land restored to agricultural use will be subject to 5 years of aftercare. An oil pipeline runs along the western edge of the application site, parallel to Grange Lane, with its location shown by the thick red line on this plan, and its approximate location shown by the red line on this aerial photo. It is the applicant's intention to seek a diversion to the pipeline, which would be done under the provisions of the Land Powers Defence Act 1958. As this matter would be dealt with under separate legislation, it is not considered appropriate to add any conditions covering this matter. However, a condition is recommended to require blast monitoring to be undertaken for any blasting operations within 400 metres of the pipeline, irrespective of whether it is diverted or remains in situ. A gas pipeline, shown by the blue line on this plan, runs across the southern extreme of the southern extension and would not need to be relocated, as this is the part of the site that will be subject to the advanced tree planting and grassland creation. All other matters have been satisfactorily addressed, including potential impacts to gliders operated from the nearby RAF Syston, with the Ministry of Defence raising no safeguarding objection to the proposals. A raft of conditions are recommended in order to protect the environment and local amenity and deliver the restoration scheme and the extended periods of aftercare. It is recommended that planning permission be granted subject to these conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Very comprehensive. Do any members or officers have any questions or points of clarification for Mr. Smith at this stage? No? Okay, thank you. So I'll now, we do have a guest speaker for this item, so I'll ask Mr. Barker, the clerk, to read out the instructions for speakers, please.
Thank you, Chair. Each speaker will have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak, with the exception of Councillor Barney, who, as the local member, has a maximum of 10 minutes to speak. Notice will be given to you when the final minute of your allotted time has arrived by me saying 1 minute. Speakers should not introduce new material, be that plan, photographs or written documents. Only issues relevant to the planning application should be addressed in the presentation, and these include the impact on local residents and the environment, relevant planning policies and government guidance. You should not refer to non-planning issues such as property rights, covenants, loss of property value or view. Members of the committee may ask you questions for purposes of clarification, and the chairman will invite the relevant officer to respond to any factual matters raised by your presentation or subsequent questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And our speaker for this item is Jeremy Elvins, who is with us, who is the applicant. So, Mr. Elvins, if you'd like to address us as soon as you're ready. So, over to you. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. Gypsum quarry in the Newark area has been continuous for 160 years. Banticock Quarry is unique. It is the only source of high purity white gypsum in the UK. The quarry is a nationally important supplier of 2 types of gypsum: specialist industrial grade for use at the adjacent Jericho factory, which is used in many essential applications such as the food industry, water treatment, agriculture, medical and dentistry. And secondly, construction grade for improving the quality of gypsum mined underground at our Barrow and East Leap plants. The extension to the quarry is vital to the continued operations at Newark. It will help Sangaban Formula and British Gypsum minimise the UK's reliance on imported gypsum. It will help to secure the long-term future of the important plaster and plasterboard manufacturing in East Midlands, protecting UK manufacturing jobs with UK-sourced raw materials. The site is an important local employer with 60% of our employees living within 10 miles. It provides direct employment for around 165 members of staff, and we make significant contributions to the local economy and have contracts with approximately 50 local suppliers for services. The company continues to make significant capital investments to modernise the manufacturing process. The extension would secure 5 million tonnes of gypsum, extending the life of the quarry until at least 2040. Despite the challenges of the COVID restrictions, we carried out a thorough public consultation exercise involving the distribution of a leaflet about the proposals to all the local residents and a dedicated interactive website viewed over 400 times. We also held online meetings with local residents, other interested parties and our local quarry liaison group. The main concern raised by the local residents related to dust and the impact of blasting at their properties. These concerns were addressed at the meetings or through correspondence. We are proud of our relationship with the community and our track record of having very few complaints from local residents. Visitors to the quarry are surprised by the low intensity of our blasting operations, which are designed to break up the gypsum seam sufficiently to allow extraction by the excavators. Blasting is continuously monitored, and we modify our blasting by reducing the amount of explosive per borehole as we approach sensitive receptors. We recognise the importance of restoration and biodiversity, and we've worked hard with our landscape architect and ecologist to ensure that we have achieved significant biodiversity gains, including substantially extending the aftercare period to ensure the delivery of high-quality restoration and public access. The restoration scheme shows a significant increase in biodiversity units when measured using the new biodiversity net gain calculations. In the last 5 years, as part of the progressive restoration of the site, 29,000 native trees have been planted, a 25-acre wildflower meadow has been created, and a further 50 acres is due to be restored later this year. Approval of this development will ensure a continued supply of this nationally important mineral. It will also help to protect 165 direct jobs and the long-term future of manufacturing plants at Newark, Barrow and Eastleek. We therefore respectfully ask that the planning permission is granted in line with officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elvins. Just within time as well. Thank you for that. Do any members or officers at this stage have any questions or queries of clarification from Mr. Elvins? No? Okay, thank you very much. So I'll open the floor up now for debate, questions, and ask any members if we have any comments or questions before we come to a decision. So any questions or comments from anyone, please? Councillor Owen.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Whenever I look at reports to planning committees, whether it be here or whether it be at the other place where I'm a councillor, the first thing I tend to turn to is the part of the report that deals with consultation and what people and organisations are saying, because I think that tends to set the context. And what I find interesting about this particular application is that virtually all consultees have offered no objection. The only two organisations that have, Newark Town Council, and they originally didn't object, and then I think they felt they needed to find an objection, and they've rather struggled by talking about avoid large vehicles driving through built-up areas. Well, we've heard this morning that there's no intention to have any more vehicles driving anywhere else other than they are at the moment. So I think that really is just clutching at straws for something to object to. And the other one is from the Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust. Now, it would be news if we had a report where the Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust didn't object to a planning application. In fact, I can't ever recall them not objecting. So I think we can perhaps take that one with a pinch of salt, I have to say. And there are three comments or three objections, we're told, from members of the public. But I notice in the comments that have been recorded there's a hefty mention of compensation littering those comments. So I'm just wondering whether or not those comments are really as serious as they should be. In other words, in my view, there are no reasons why we should not be supporting this application. The only thing that frightened me when I was listening to Mr. Smith's presentation was that this doesn't finish, the restoration doesn't have to be finished until 2044, and I shall no doubt be long dead and buried or cremated or whatever else my wife wants to do to me when I've gone. So it rather puts it all into perspective these days. But nevertheless, I still feel able to make a decision this morning, and I shall vote in favour of giving planning approval.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Probably no need to come back on any of those points at this stage. Thank you, Councillor Camilleri. I'll come to you in a moment, but Councillor Hensh.
I don't want to get involved
Gentlemen,
with
please.
internecine
Councillor
arguments
Hensh.
between the Conservative group about stuffing each other, but I mean, that's, that's how things go. I mean, looking at the planning application in great detail, yeah, there may not be any planning reasons why we should vote against the recommendations. But in relation to the objections, I mean, when you look at the Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust, and I don't dismiss Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust's ability to formulate objections and put forward ideas in relation to planning applications, and it's right that such an organisation does that because their main concern is the protection of the environment and wildlife. So therefore, usually what happens when they put a comment in relation to a planning application, that is from the perspective that they're looking at. But in relation to the restoration project in I don't know how many years' time, I mean, the committee have been on and visited sites in other quarries where the restoration, when completed, will make sure that environment is as good or if not better than the one that they actually ripped out to do the mining or do the quarrying. But I would just like to ask the officers, taking into consideration the scope and the length of the Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust's objections, do we think that the points highlighted from the applicant in relation to restoration will be subsequently adequate to make sure that the environment in 40 years' time, when I might be dead and buried along with Councillor Owen, I know, do they think that they would mitigate the actual taking of the gypsum now? And what I would like to ask, Chair, is if possible, I mean, we get reports on a regular basis from wildlife organisations and from other organisations when they say they've conducted an ecological survey. Would it be possible for the committee to be informed in more detail of how these surveys are undertaken, just for our interest? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henshaw. Perfectly understandable questions and points raised there. Mr. Smith, please.
In terms of delivering the restoration scheme, as you're probably aware, the Environment Act came into force quite recently, and it's brought into force this requirement for development to deliver biodiversity net gain. And the government, through Natural England, have introduced this metric calculation whereby you're able to demonstrate how much net gain is being provided. And they provided those calculations, and actually what we've done as officers through the course of the application, when I talked earlier about how there's going to be different aftercare periods for different types of habitats, those different periods are actually designed and are informed by the metric calculations to ensure that the restoration, the final restored habitat, is as good as it can possibly be. So that's why the woodland restoration is going to be for 30 years, because they take the longest time to mature, and the shingle habitat around the lakes is going to be for 20 years, and all the other areas except for the arable will be for 15 years. And if you shorten those aftercare periods, the results from the biodiversity net gain metric wouldn't show as much biodiversity net gain being delivered. So we are comfortable that we are maximising those biodiversity net gains. In terms of the other point about how these kind of surveys are done, I think during the last administration we had a number of sessions where various officers, we had the archaeologists came, we had highways officers come, and they've talked about certain specialisms like that, and I'd be more than happy to speak to the county ecologist and ask that he comes to a future meeting and he can describe the kind of work that how he looks at planning applications and how he assesses those types of surveys. I'd be more than happy to put that in place.
Thank you. I think that would be very helpful. So we'll get something arranged on that. Any other questions or comments on this, or are we ready to go to a decision? I don't see any hands going up. This is a huge report, and quite rightly so, because it covers, people will always get worried and interested when there's any reference to quarrying, and you can understand that completely. But I think the points have been covered pretty well. It's a couple of us did go on a site visit. I can't remember what it was now, but it was probably last year or certainly earlier this year. And it was fascinating. Really did find it fascinating, especially to watch the blasting, because it's, as you will have seen from the video, it's not a great, huge, what you might expect explosion. For what it is an explosion, but it's not a dramatic one. It's all very subtle. And also, one of the photographs showed the seams of the material, and maybe it's a bit anarchy of me, but it's fascinating just to see just the material there. But the other thing that struck me was despite the fact that everyone was working there, how quiet it was, the atmosphere, and also we saw plenty of wildlife doing what it does. Wild hares, for example, were all over the area, and it was all seemed to me to be very well managed. So, and also, as we know as well, it is the only facility in the country now that produces this material. So anyway, I've probably gone on enough about that. Shall we go to a decision? Can I have a show of hands, those in favour of the application? And I think that's unanimous, but just for the record, anyone against? And any abstentions? No. So permission is granted. So thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Smith, as well. We will arrange a little bit of a future training session on consultation. Right, so I'll just, no musical chairs going on, no, so we're okay. Oh yes, we'll just wait for the, I was going to say, yes, you can escape now, so. You'd be welcome to stay if you wanted to, but thanks very much. Right, so we go on to our next planning application for today, which is the erection of a primary school at East Leek. I'll formally move the recommendations, which are on page 219 of the agenda pack. Councillor Creamer, please.
Formally second and reserve the right to speak, Chair.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Marsh, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for the construction of a 315-place primary school along with a 26-place nursery to be known as Millside Spencer Academy on Evans Road, a loop road within a David Wilson Homes residential development under construction to the south of East Leek. The school will be provided on 2 sites, separated by a strip of land outside of the application site and in other ownership, but the sites are connected by a public footpath that runs past the western boundary of both sites. The site to the north would be used as playing field and is land that was identified as a school site as part of the now built Persimmon Homes residential estate to the west. The applicant has submitted a fly-through video of the proposed development on the main school site. School buildings, staff, visitor car park, servicing and outdoor play areas would be provided on the southern site, with a vehicular access and pedestrian gate to be used outside of school start-finish times, taking access directly from Evans Road. The school building would sit at a lower level than the road, reducing the visual impact of the proposed two-storey school building. An outdoor hard play area would be provided in the southwest corner of the site at the point where the cycle footpath is to be provided as part of the David Wilson Homes development. Right, yes, it's the point where the cycle path to be provided as part of the David Wilson Homes development. It meets Evans Road. Use of the outdoor hard play area could have an impact on the amenity of future residents, and a mitigation and acoustic fence is proposed along the western boundary of the hard play area. The following slides show images of the proposed development provided by the applicant. Okay. 30 car parking spaces would be provided in total for staff and visitors. No specific provision is made for parent drop-off and pick-up within the school site, but the highway network has been planned in knowledge of the proposed location of the school. The carriageway is 6.75 metres in width, which would allow two-way car movement past a parked car on one side of the road. A school zone would be provided with zigzag and double yellow lines marked at the vehicular entrance and at the point where the cycle footpath crosses Evans Road. The pedestrian gate for school start-finish times would be provided off the cycle footpath, with a fenced area within the site made available for parents to assemble. Pedestrian and cycle access would be gained along the route that is already in part being provided by David Wilson Homes, linking Sheepwash Way and the future Evans Road. This is likely to attract traffic associated with the school run to both Evans Way and to Sheepwash Way and nearby roads. The statutory process to introduce a traffic regulation order on Sheepwash Way for the opening of the temporary school on the permanent playing field site in September 2022 is about to begin. If driving to Sheepwash Way from within East Leek, parents will then have a longer walk to the school gate. It will be more convenient to park close to the school on Evans Road. The school will be closer to the school gate, and accessing the school from Remston Road may be easier for those dropping off or collecting children as part of a daily commute to destinations outside of East Leek. The school is to provide pupil places principally for new houses planned or recently built in East Leek. The David Wilson Homes and Persimmon Homes sites will provide 642 dwellings, which in itself would generate demand for 135 pupil places in proximity to the school. Those parents may find it more convenient to walk rather than to drive, park and then walk to the school gate. Excluding staff, at full school occupancy, the transport statement expects that there would be 50 car journeys associated with school drop-off in the morning peak hour, split between accessing the site from Evans Way or via Sheepwash Way. Suitable vehicular and pedestrian access will need to be in place by the time the school is ready to open, planned to be September 2023. As the housing site on Evans Road is under construction, the County Council, as applicant, will need to ensure that appropriate terms are included in the transfer of the land so that the required infrastructure beyond the school boundary is in place by the time the school is ready to open. Key to this will be the provision of the cycle footpath being constructed to an appropriate standard for the amount of foot traffic that will use it in terms of construction, surfacing and lighting. Paragraph 63 of the report advises that any additional comments from Rushcliffe Borough Council will be reported to this meeting. In addition to the Rushcliffe Borough Council recommended conditions already included in the published report, additional matters have been raised that broadly reflect the issues raised by Eastleek Parish Council. So they are a lack of parking for staff and visitors, the potential for traffic issues around the school at pick-up and drop-off times, and lack of provision for buses, coaches, with consideration to be given to a dedicated vehicular drop-off pick-up zone outside the school, including for buses and coaches. Making an officer response on these issues, the school is smaller than previously approved in outline, and it would have a proportionately larger car park, suitably sized for both staff and visitors. Adequate on-street parking would be available on Evans Road and the Persimmon Homes development in proximity to the school. Suitable provision would be available outside the school for a bus to park, allowing children to alight safely. The Council comment on the provision of safe pedestrian and cycle routes from the adjacent housing developments and wider area. Consideration should be given to the provision of a dedicated gathering area for parents and guardians so as not to block the public footpath, pavements, cycle paths for other users at the school's start and end times, and the provision of secure provision for children's scooters. Our officer comment on this matter is that the school would be accessed directly at school start-finish times from the cycle footpath. A dedicated parent assembly area is provided inside the perimeter fence, and school cycle parking in a secured area can also accommodate scooters. Provision of a vehicular access to the playing fields by emergency vehicles is questioned. On that matter, a route would be available to the playing field from Sheepwash Way and may also be available along the path from Evans Road in exceptional circumstances. That the school cannot be expanded to accommodate future demand for pupil places is raised, and I shall come on to the size of the school shortly, but in summary, pupil place planning projections do not show a demand for pupil places for built and planned development above that which can be accommodated in the proposed 315 place school. The representation identifies a need for a traffic regulation order, school zone safety measures to be in place and all along Sheepwash Way. A school crossing patrol would increase child safety. Consideration should be given to the implications of traffic regulation orders in the event that such controls are not secured through the democratic process. On that matter, a traffic regulation order is proposed on both Evans Road and Sheepwash Way, and a traffic regulation order is being introduced for the opening of the temporary school accessed from Sheepwash Way. The making of a traffic regulation order is subject to separate statutory process. The aim is to make the highway a safer environment for road users, and if objections are raised and successful, the residents would be the parties that would be adversely affected. The grants of planning permission for the residential developments both identified the provision and location of a school, and school-related traffic and a school zone could reasonably be anticipated. The suggested provision of hedgehog highways and perimeter fencing made in the representation has already been incorporated in the design. A lack of provision of solar panels with consideration to be given to the environmental credentials of the building is raised. In response to this issue, the applicant has set out the sustainable credentials of the building. Additional or alternative provision could be made, but the applicant has set out that the design is limited by budget, that the price of photovoltaics is reducing, and their provision may be a more cost-effective addition to be fitted retrospectively. Finally, Rushcliffe recommend that technical input should be sought from the Highways Authority, Lead Local Flood Authority and Archaeology, and those consultation responses are in the report. Since the publication of papers, Rushcliffe Borough Councillor Thomas has written asking for clarification of the table in figure 4 of the report, as, she says, it appears to show that there will be insufficient reception places at the school from 2024 to 2025 onwards. And if the school were to continue with larger classes year on year, it would use all the 315 place capacity and run out of space as early as 2027. She asks whether the additional capacity planned would be enough to cater for all the new houses already approved in Eastleek. This query has been put to the applicant, and the applicant has responded by saying that a Department for Education accepted formula is used by Nottinghamshire County Council as a methodology to make sensible projections for school places in the pupil planning area, but not at individual school or year group level, because this is impossible to accurately project. The methodology used by Nottinghamshire County Council is validated by the Department for Education through the annual School Capacity Survey, which is a statutory data collection which the County Council is required to make. This data is also the basis for Nottinghamshire County Council's responses to planning applications and for securing funding from the Department for Education for basic need and from housing developers. Once the permanent capacity of 315 places is added at Millside Primary School, the projected deficit in 2025-26 of 257 places is addressed entirely and results in a small surplus of 58 places. Nottinghamshire County Council will therefore have addressed its core responsibility to provide enough school places in the Eastleek planning area. Consideration must also be given to the fact that nationally and locally there is a marked decline in the number of children being born. This pattern is likely to be evident in the Eastleek planning area in due course, and in combination with housing information that was provided by Rushcliffe Borough Council in 2021, which did not indicate any further significant housing in Eastleek beyond 2026, makes it unlikely that the whole school will run out of places by 2027. If there were to be further increases in demand that could not be accommodated through the new places being created at Millside, Nottinghamshire County Council would seek further funding to mitigate this additional pressure, either through basic need for population growth or through housing developer contribution if the extra demand could be attributed to further housing. It is also of note that the schools within this planning area now include Millside Spencer Academy. They would be able to facilitate time-limited bulge years whilst trends and demand are better understood. Therefore, Nottinghamshire County Council is confident that the provision of the new Millside Spencer Academy's 315-place school will be sufficient to meet the expected demand in the period covered by the current projections. In the event that there is a reception year group in the future which cannot be accommodated from the existing cumulative published admission number of 165 when Millside is fully operational, Nottinghamshire County Council would work with the Spencer Academy Trust and other primary schools within the planning area to secure a plan to provide additional places. Without the evidence to suggest sustained demand, it would not be economically prudent to plan to build a larger school. Children who may require a primary school place in the period after 2027 have not yet been born. Current processes to review pupil projections will continue to be undertaken and will continue to be reviewed and validated by the yearly school capacity return to the Department for Education. We've received some additional late representation since the report was published. Rushcliffe Borough Councillor Way has written raising concerns about traffic and access, saying that the officer report from paragraph 100 onwards seems to be arguing that if it is difficult to drop off children by car, more sustainable options will be used instead. Councillor Way considers this is not true. Parents will still drive, particularly if they need to continue on to their workplace, but they and everyone else will be frustrated by the fact that there is no provision for parking. The council would rather turn this around and try to actively improve options for sustainable travel, more in line with paragraph 112 of the National Planning Policy Framework, which advocates giving priority first to pedestrian and cycle movements, both within the scheme and within neighbouring areas. Councillor Way states that as ward members representing the local community, she and others have a good grasp of measures within the wider area that could take this forward, and would welcome a meeting with relevant parties at both Nottinghamshire and Rushcliffe councils to explore the options. There should be time when the school is being built and during the period when it is filling up to make real changes to give parents options rather than simply making life difficult for everyone. In response to this point, members are advised that recommended condition 34 includes a requirement for the applicant to demonstrate that active engagement has taken place with the local community in the preparation of the travel plan. While the travel plan is something that can only be completed once a school has been brought into operation, an additional note to applicant is recommended to encourage active engagement with the local members at Rushcliffe Borough Council and with the Parish Council. The representation also draws attention to the lost opportunity to provide solar panels on the school building roof, the need for the school to make proposals for parent assembly workable, and would prefer to see additional space provided to park scooters. The response to these points has already been given in a commentary on the same matters raised by Rushcliffe Borough Council. The separation of the two school sites by land in third-party ownership is noted, and it is hoped that this can be resolved to form one continuous site, avoiding the need for children to have to walk between the two sites along the public footpath. Officers consider while such a resolution would be beneficial, it does not form part of the application under consideration. The comments from a resident at Sheepwash Way are reported at paragraph 93 and has submitted a further representation since the papers were published, again drawing attention to the likely problem of parking by school-related traffic on shared private drives. There is one at the end of Sheepwash Way and also ones next to the proposed school vehicular entrance on Evans Road and to the west of the route of public footpath FP5. The resident refers to a traffic regulation order and double yellow lines being proposed in the turning head of Sheepwash Way, and with regards to private drives, quotes paragraph 115 of the committee report, which states that occupiers would be able to exercise private property rights to control errant parking. A similar statement in the previous officer report for the outline application for the school was criticised by committee, who also suggested that H-bars be provided across residents' driveways to deal with an easily foreseeable problem. The resident considers that developers have the budget to make a real difference to the lives of those on the private drives and urges the recommendation that road markings be added to the drives of each private drive stating residents access only, or words to that effect, even though there would be no way to enforce parking on private drives. There is a private drive at the end of Sheepwash Way and also ones next to the proposed entrance on vehicular entrance on Evans Road and west of the route on public footpath 5. In commenting on the above points, it should be noted that the traffic regulation order proposed for Sheepwash Way and the indicative traffic regulation order for Evans Road both propose either double yellow lines or school keep clear markings across the entrances to the private drives, which may act as a deterrent. A traffic regulation order can be imposed on land that is to become the future adopted highway, and the resident is correct that any measures introduced on shared private drives would not be able to be enforced. The drives are shared, and anything which is done in terms of marking would need to be the collective agreement of the affected residents. The shared private drive is not within the red line of a planning application site, so planning conditions cannot be imposed in determining this application. The applicant has submitted updated landscape plans since the report was published that make the layout and landscape proposals consistent with the site plans referenced in condition 3. A revised fencing plan on the northern site offsets the perimeter fence so that it would be positioned on the school side of a hedge with appropriate gates incorporated to allow mammals to pass. Condition 3 needs to be amended to include reference to the amended drawing revision shown on this slide related to revised alterations of the site layout, finishes and landscape. And the reference made to the drawing to be approved by condition 3M in condition 24 will need to be changed to revision P06. In condition 10, the numbering in Roman numerals should begin with I and not H. And within the Roman numeral 7, within that condition, that the words or hedges should be added to the word after the word trees on the fourth line of text to give additional protection to both trees and hedges. Subject to the changes provided in this update, the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 1 as amended by the reported updates to conditions 3, 10 and 24 and additional note to applicant. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Marsh. That was very comprehensive and detailed, so thank you for that. Do any members or officers have any questions or points of clarification at this stage? Oh, my goodness me. First hand I saw was Councillor Smith, then Councillor Creamer, then Councillor Adams and Councillor Owen. So Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Marsh, for that, as ever, detailed report there. You mentioned in your report about addressing our concerns regarding drop-off and pick-up, and you mentioned Evans Road having a width of 6.75 metres, so you can have double cars on each side. The plans we have seen, or I have seen personally, don't demonstrate, and I know they don't because the houses aren't built yet, whether Evans Road will have any private driveways on it, particularly outside the school. So I just wondered if you could confirm that, if you've seen the bigger plans. Thank you.
We'll just get a slide up which
yes,
shows
absolutely.
the traffic regulation order on Evans Road. And if I could also refer to the diagram at paragraph 112 of the report. So, yes, thank you. So do I have a pointer? Well, you'll be able to point to them. So there are two private drives in proximity to the school entrance on Evans Road. Sorry?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. It is, yes. So the one which Jonathan is pointing to at the moment is at the end of where the public footpath would come out, is adjacent to where the public footpath would come out onto Evans Road, and the entrance to that private drive would be covered by proposed zigzags, school keep clear markings. The other private drive is to the east, which is at the point indicated at that point there, yes, where the cursor's pointing. And at paragraph 112, there is a figure 5, which shows that on a carriageway of 4.1 metres that two cars can pass, and with the additional width, taking it to it's approximately. The diagram shows a 2.75 single carriageway lane, but does have additional room at the side of that vehicle that it would be possible to park and still have two-way traffic on Evans Road. Passing.
Let's come back, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Where those three purple houses are there, and there's the two trees after the bend, they're driveways, aren't they?
Yes, that's not a shared driveway. That's a private driveway. Yeah.
Thank you. And Councillor Creamer, please.
Thank you. Just for clarification, on the photovoltaics, not having them at the moment, it said they could be fitted retrospective. Does the actual design of the school allow for retrospective fitting of it? That's clarification.
I have discussed this with the applicant and have said that they can be fitted retrospectively.
Councillor Adams, please.
Thank you, Chairman. And again, thank you for the presentation. Just a quick thing. Point 121 on page 212. It talks about the volume of staff anticipated. And specifically, there is a break in the arrival of the catering staff in the morning and then the cleaning staff in the afternoon. Do we have a confirmation on time of arrival and exit of each of those parties? One of the sort of, if you like, initial observations from this side of things would be that there would be a crossover in those times, which would effectively mean the car parking spaces wouldn't be adequate to deal with that volume. I just wonder if we could have that stipulated, specifically what those times of working are, and maybe added in the report as a condition to ensure that that's stuck to, so that we don't have that massive sort of crossover and effective overspillage from the 30 spaces out to the main highway. Thank you.
Well, that would be an operational issue for the school, but from experience of schools elsewhere, the catering staff will arrive in the morning, leave after they have finished their catering duties. The cleaning staff will tend to come in towards the end of the day, and you will also have midday supervisors who will arrive, but it's found that those tend to be people who come in from more local areas and are less likely to travel by car to carry out those sorts of duties. But in terms of imposing that as a condition, I think it would be very difficult and impose an operational control which I think it may be, well, it might unduly restrict the way in which a school could operate. I think we are dealing with a new school which we don't know at the moment exactly how that would operate, and the car park has been sized based on experience of schools elsewhere within the county and the amount and the traffic numbers which are associated with those.
Councillor Adams, you want to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you. There we go, it's alive. Yeah, it just always worries me when these things, when we don't have the specifics of operation. You know, you're asked to approve a planning application on the basis of in part, its operation as a site, opening times, closing times, what goes on. We've just done it with the quarry. We've looked at their operational times quite clearly in the quarry, and they were stipulated specifically. What we shouldn't be doing when we do planning applications of this nature is leaving things to a certain degree unanswered. I think purely from, if you're a resident in that area and that's not covered, and how do they then raise that in the future as a complaint, if you like, to, let's say, for example, environmental health, for whatever specific reason it's causing some sort of issue locally. How would they then raise that if those operational times aren't stipulated? And also, how do we come to, how do we get that 30 number if we don't know how many people are going to be using it at which times, and it's not specifically stipulated? I get what you're saying about schools, and schools do operate in their own way, I understand that. But if we're saying it's for catering staff in the morning and cleaning staff in the afternoon, what is that? Is there a crossover? Do we know there's a crossover? Or are we just, if the school decides to make a crossover, that, if we leave it sort of to them to make that decision?
But sorry.
Yes, please, Mr. Marshall.
It is a point. I mean, it is down to how the school would operate. We are the assessment of the adequacy of the size of the car park is based on assumptions, but the school, within the scope of a planning permission, would be able to operate as they fit, as long as they're within the terms of permission granted. In terms of the sizing of the car park and it being of an appropriate size for staff and visitors, that is something on which we take advice from Highways Development Control. And we do have representative from Highways, if you would, if
Yes,
to
yeah,
ask
if there,
that question?
perhaps it would help. Would you like a little bit of further clarity and explanation from the highways? Yep, okay, so who would like to... is Daniel on?
Yes,
Daniel's online, isn't he?
I'm Daniel Sullivan. Can you hear me?
Yep, got you.
Yes. Okay, yeah. So with
Can't
with this
see you, but
application,
we can hear you, but we can't see you.
I can put my camera on. Is that working?
Yes, full screen.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So with this application, as David Marsh mentioned, it was due to be a 2-form entry school. Now it's 1.5. So it's quite a lot smaller than what was originally looked at and approved historically. The 30-place car park for a 1.5 form entry school is relatively large, and we have obviously seen a number of schools all around Nottinghamshire for a number of years. So it is something that we assess against other schools and see if there are issues with other schools. That 30 spaces is quite a large provision, and as David said, it's proportionately larger than what would originally been with the original school. In terms of operation, as David mentioned as well, when midday supervisors come, when cleaners come, that's ordinarily dealt with by the school and how they operate. But usually, midday supervisors will have a finish time at a certain time, and then cleaners will come at a certain time, so as not to clash. But the main thing is the size of that car park is satisfactory in our mind from highways.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. And
Okay.
Councillor Adams, you're looking at me as if to say you want to come back. So you're.
I'm sorry, I'm just not used to hearing usuallys and maybes and, sometimes and often. And it's just quite unusual language to me in the case of a planning application. I'd rather hear, this is what's happening and see that in written form, because then it gives somebody an opportunity of a way of coming back and determining what's actually happening and a point of reference to that. I've got real concerns about this from a parking perspective. So, I think it's just about if we can...
Because I was just sorry to interrupt, but we've got some public or some speakers on this matter, and so I think the questions were for clarification, and so we haven't yet moved to the debate.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. So we will come back to it in a bit. So yes, we are on points of clarification. So Councillor Owen, you wanted to make a point of clarification, and then I've got Councillor Helen Smith.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I wanted to come back to the issue of the private drives. And we're told that we can't put traffic regulation orders on them because they're outside of the planning application site, which I find a little bit bizarre, I have to say, because it seems to me that the whole of the rest of the estate and the proposed estate is within the site, but these private drives are not. And if we have the slide back up again of the private drives, they are very close to the school entrance, and I believe. And so if they are not protected by a traffic regulation order, then we are going to see people parking there. So I would have thought we could have put a requirement on for a traffic regulation order on those private drives. If the applicant then wishes to challenge that condition, I presume they could do so, but I think it's going to be highly unlikely that they would challenge and delay the whole process. So I just wonder what officers' views are on that, because I have concerns.
We'll get clarification on that, but by the very nature, though, aren't private? If a drive is private, is it not down to the people who are responsible for that drive to?
No. Yes, we can ask them to do it.
But we'll get the clarification from the experts anyway. Mr. Marsh.
What is proposed are is a traffic regulation order on land which is outside of the application site but would be the future adopted highway. And that can be delivered, but I think what, in terms of what you're suggesting, that you could put a traffic regulation order on a private drive that would be land outside of this application site. And
yes, but Chairman, every road is outside of the application site. I am asking, is it not possible to condition putting a traffic regulation order on that private drive? It would clearly have to be with the agreement of the owners. I didn't realise you could do this until a few weeks ago, because I have a side road at the side of me, which is a damn nuisance for people parking, and it's a private drive, if you like. It's unadopted, and that's exactly what this is. So I'm trying to establish whether or not it would be permissible, with the consent of the owners of those properties, to have a traffic regulation order on that private drive as part of the conditions.
Yes. Do we know the answer to that, please?
Well, could we ask Highways to comment on that? Because it would be a highway
Mr. Sullivan,
regulation.
Yeah.
Some clarity on that, please.
Yeah, so with these traffic regulation order plans, we've had liaisons with our traffic regulation order department and the officers who draw up traffic regulation orders. So what we've made sure is part of the planning application that what would go out for consultation in the traffic regulation order process is appropriate. So members of the public can make representations, can object, can ask for revisions, and that would all be assessed as part of the traffic regulation order process. So these plans currently are what would go out to consultation on if the planning application was approved. So they can be amended if the traffic regulation order department sees fit. As to, is the question for traffic regulation orders actually on a shared private drive or to the front of a shared private drive?
I think you were referring to...
It was on the drive. We've already been told.
Drive.
And it's in the report, but we've been told as well as a fallback position that the drive, it's the front of the drive, the entrance to the drive is going to be protected with a traffic regulation order. All I'm asking is it possible to have a traffic regulation order on the drive itself? And I think the answer I'm getting is yes, it is, but we're not going to consult on it.
Is that clear, Mr. Sullivan?
I don't believe that traffic regulation orders can be on shared private drives because these are enforced by the Highway Authority. So the private land is not adopted highway, so that's outside of the Highway Authority's control. So, but I can ask our traffic regulation order departments if they have any experience or history of placing them on shared private drives, and if they are enforceable, I can.
I was told, Chairman, by the highways manager for my area that it is possible to have them on unadopted roads with the agreement of all the residents. And so we would surely go out to if we want, we can go out to consultation on that shared private drive, and if the residents say no, we don't want it, that's fine. If they say yes, we do want it, then it's part of the application and we can do it. To me, it's simple and straightforward. We just go and ask people.
Right, Mr. Marsh, do you want to come back on that, please?
Well, in the particular case around Evans Road, there are no residents because they haven't yet started building those houses. It's a planned layout.
Right. So with that in mind, we're still on our point of clarification. Let's get through this, and we'll come back to this later. And we've possibly hear a little bit more information from the other speakers on this item, because I'm conscious of time and need to get through all these points. Councillor Helen Smith, please. And this is just points and clarifications.
It is, Chair. Can we just bring the slide back up again that we've had on quite a few times already this morning, where we look at the three houses that the other Councillor Smith was made reference to earlier. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. So we've got the zigzags on front of the private drives a bit further up, but when in the reference to the 3 purple properties that have got their own personal drives, could we put a traffic regulation order with the double yellow lines that have got a time period on them? Because one of the biggest problems that I get with existing schools is people parking, blocking people's drives, and there's nothing that anyone can do about it. And they just say, oh, there's no double yellow line, so it's tough. But if we could put the timed ones on, and I don't know where you've got the times from. I don't know if that's also based on assumptions that are on page 200 at 55, between where they're saying it's going to be worse between 8:45 and 9 and 2 and 3:30. But if we could look at how those times were formed and potentially have the double yellow lines for those time periods as well, is that possible?
So advice on extra yellow lines, or maybe other possible measures?
Yes, on that length of carriageway, which would be future adopted highway, yes, we could look at that. This plan has been submitted as being indicative of a traffic regulation order, unlike the one which was which is on Sheepwash Way, which has been prepared by VIA. This is one which is submitted indicatively, and things such as extending the lengths where the traffic regulation order would apply can be considered, yes.
Okay, thank you. And finally, one very minor point of clarification from me, which is very, very simple. The proposed date of the school opening is 2023, isn't it? And not 2020, because on paragraph 131, it refers to opening in September 22. And I'm sure that's very ambitious, isn't it? Just for clarification.
If that's so, yeah. Yes, it would be September 2023.
Right. Thank you. Well, we've had a lot of points of clarification on that, and I understand completely. Oh, sorry, Mr. Councillor Henshaw. I didn't see your hand.
Just a point of clarification. Obviously, the officers mentioned the reason why they're not putting solar panels or photoelectric cells in at the start, and presumably at some point in the future they will be doing that. I'm a bit disappointed with that, because obviously in relation to the County Council's commitment to reducing our carbon footprint, I think these sort of things should be incorporated right from the onset and not left to some point in the future. So, and I know money's tight, but I think we should be putting forward the highest possible environmental standards right from the onset of any project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henshaw. Mr. Marsh.
The applicant has put forward a package of measures which demonstrate the sustainable credentials of the building. In this particular instance, it doesn't include photovoltaics. We do have the applicant as a speaker this morning who may be able to clarify on that point.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was going to make the very same point. Thank you, Councillor Henshaw. Right, we do have further speakers on this item. So we will now go on to Marianne Clay, who is the applicant from the County Council, who has been diligently listening to the points of clarifications raised to Mr. Marsh. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we have. Even without asking, we will have points raised. But anyway, Marianne, as soon as you're ready, if you would like to address us, please.
Eastleek is a planning area which currently includes Brookside Primary Academy, Lantern Lane Community School and Costock C of E Primary School. As a result of house building, there is now a need for a new primary school. Projected demand would strongly suggest that the need can be met by the provision of a 315-place primary school on the Rempston Road site. A presumption to identify the academy sponsor has already been undertaken, and this new primary school will be operated by the Spencer Academy Trust. Due to site access constraints, a temporary school will be operating from September 2022 to meet local demand, and it is expected that the permanent building will be completed for the academic year 23-24. For this to happen, the contractors need to mobilise the site as quickly as possible, Hence, this application requires the approval of members of this committee. It is of note that the planning permission for the temporary village expires by September 23. Without these school places created in the temporary village for September 2022 and the permanent site for the 23-24 academic year, it will not be possible to accommodate many Eastleigh children within the planning area. The design of Millside Spencer Academy seeks to balance initial capital costs against long-term operating and maintenance costs. Consideration has been given to the conservation of energy. High levels of insulation and air tightness reduce heat loss, while ample natural light, energy-efficient LED lighting, mechanical ventilation, and heat recovery, along with natural ventilation, aim to create a comfortable environment conducive to learning. The building is fully electric, making use of air source heat pumps and providing electrical vehicle charging.
1 minute.
Providing PVs as part of the initial build was considered. However, associated capital costs required balancing against other key priorities for the scheme. The design and structure allows for the future installation of PV panels to further reduce the reliance on the grid. Better value and effectiveness can be realised as the cost of PV panels reduces and the grid is decarbonised in the future. Thought has been given to sustainable travel, including pedestrian and cycle routes. Biodiversity has been a key driver, seeking to support existing wildlife as well as encouraging biodiversity net gain. We believe that projects such as this not only fulfil a specific purpose, but provide learning opportunities for children, demonstrating how technology is used as part of the design process, on the site activities of how buildings are constructed and put together, understanding of waste recycle, as well as considerations for dismantling and reuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Clay, and that was very helpful within time. Now, again, points of questions or points of clarification on what we've heard. Does anyone have any comments or queries? No? Okay. Oh, well, that's something. I mean, there's a danger here of losing the fact that we're talking about a new school for children, our future generations. So there's a danger of getting a little bit exercised about important other matters, but anyway, I'll move on. So we have no questions to Marion. So we have one more speaker on this, who is the local member, Councillor Barney, who has been very patient, and you have how long is it? You have up to 10 minutes, which you may or may not choose to use, but the floor is yours, Councillor Barney.
Well, thank you, Chairman, and I don't feel like I've been patient at all. In fact, I'm grateful to the members for their considered comments already made, and I can't wait for the full debate if that was just the points of clarification. So take all the time you want. It's important we get these details right. I think this school will probably be there for 100 years or more, and I think this detail at this time is right to consider these things properly. So thank you, members, for doing that, all of you. However, I cannot begin to express just how delighted I am to have reached this juncture. I have had personal involvement in bringing this site forward to alleviate the enormous pressures faced by Eastleigh families following round after round of housing developments. Indeed, I first made the proposal for a school to be located at this site to Matt Hilton and Paul Taylor, who were planning officers at Rushcliffe Borough Council back in 2014. And it's so long ago, it was actually in the old Rushcliffe building across the way here. The site is especially beautiful, surrounded by woodlands and looking out over ancient ridge and furrow fields. The plans we have before us are well considered, and personally, I think the proposed structure is attractive and will lend itself well to the setting. I'd also like to sincerely express my enormous gratitude to officers at this authority who have worked tirelessly to deliver this site around a number of significant constraints and obstacles. The site has had several landowners and interested parties. It adjoins a public right-of-way. Unfortunately, to date, it remains dissected in two by a strip of land in third-party ownership, and I will touch on this again in a moment. Officers have also worked hard to facilitate the temporary learning village element of the school to prevent the busing of Eastleigh children out of the village, and I'm pleased to report that this remains on track to accommodate pupils from this September. I'm also extremely grateful to the local borough and the local parish councillors in Eastleigh for their considered support and constructive comments, and to the highly enthusiastic and newly appointed head of the school, Sophia Thorne. I've also been contacted by residents and so bring together a summary of all these comments from my perspective. So, by far the biggest and indeed the most regrettable issue at this site remains the strip of land as identified as being in third-party ownership. I am delighted that the school will be fully operational and serviceable with this strip remaining. Indeed, Millside Academy foresee no operational issue with this being the case. However, I personally and passionately want to make a plea to the landowner. Please consider making an act of extreme kindness by releasing your interest in this land. The school would just be so much better without this unnecessary constraint, and the strip of land between the two sites has no commercial value. Indeed, in my view, it will become a significant ongoing liability. I share concerns that the proposed school is now smaller than the original two-form entry school previously proposed and may be difficult to expand, particularly in the numbers of required pupil places appear to potentially outstrip supply in the near future. And I think the clarification we've had today is good, but to my mind is still fairly muddy. Further to the comments made by others, I also would like to seek clarification that the piling of soil and minerals from the adjacent David Wilson site are not in any way limiting our ability to build this school or prevent its future expansion. If this is the case, then I believe that David Wilson would be responsible for removal of this material and any decontamination at the site at no cost to this authority. In reading the report, I understand the arguments presented by officers as to why there continues to be no provision for parents travelling by car to drop off and to pick up children at the front gate. I still feel that this is a shame, but I do acknowledge the increased provisions for parking made since the outline planning committee stage, but I still have concerns it won't be enough. In respect of the electric charging points and the inclusion of PV panels, I really believe that these should be included from the outset. That is not to say that I don't fully appreciate the incredible £13 million commitment already made by this authority to build this first-class school for our residents. I just feel that in line, and endorsing Councillor Henshaw's comments, in line with our climate emergency pledges, the example we want to set for future generations, that these measures should be included, and they should be included now. I certainly do not accept the ridiculous suggestion that was made at Rushcliffe Borough Council that PV panels have been omitted because of the proximity to the flight path of East Midlands Airport. There is a 2-hectare glass house whose roof is covered in solar PV panels with 100 metres of this school. But I do wonder if East Midlands Airport may hold the key in facilitating green measures at the site. The Airport Low Carbon Environmental Fund could be approached to support both polar PV and EV charging points. I have spoken to the administrator of the fund, and the school falls within the geographical area to claim for such a grant. I therefore seek approval from this authority for me to work closely with Eastleigh Parish Council and Borough Councillors to submit such a bid. I think we would stand a very good chance of being successful. I completely endorse the comments made by others with regard to enabling the free roaming of hedgehogs. Access should be provided throughout the site, and might I suggest, especially into the strip in third-party land ownership. If nothing else, this could make a wonderful buffer zone and a hedgehog paradise for generations. I've received comments from concerned residents of Sheepwash Way who are going to be affected at the school drop-off and collection times. I hope that I can provide some comfort in the fact that to date, and while this figure is not set in stone, only 27 pupils are currently registered to utilise the temporary learning village from this year. While the access arrangements are not perfect, I'm grateful for the patience of residents living on Sheepwash Way. I suggest that as well as providing sensible double yellow lining, we may also have to mark some private driveways and provide other signage to minimise disruption wherever possible. And I know also the conversation that there has been had this morning to this respect. I'd once again like to thank all involved on this exciting and long journey. From Elliot Cooper, I saw this morning, who's the site manager at the site working for Morgan Sindall, to the excited and incredible new teachers and the head who I've mentioned, to the pupils and the parents who are also excited and looking forward to starting their new term from September, and to the officers, one of whom is sat behind me, and many others who have worked so hard to bring this site forward. I also think it's correct on this occasion to thank those who have donated land, who, had they not done so, this site would never have come forward. So thank you to them. Finally, thank you to the committee. Thank you for listening to me. And I ask that you please, 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 please approve. this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barney, for your impassioned comments, and all of which are noted and understood and taken on board. Do any members have any questions or points of clarification for Councillor Barney, the local member? No. Okay, so thank you again. So we'll now open up for for actual debate and discussion and decision. Oh, and the hands are going up. So the first hand I saw was Councillor Owen, then Councillor Helen Smith, then Councillor Sam Smith.
Chairman, you are quite right that we should be celebrating the fact that there is going to be another brand new school in Nottinghamshire. And I know Councillor Barney has put on record his thanks to officers, but I would also like to put on record my thanks to Marion Clay and her pupil planning team. My thanks for all the sterling work that they have done over the past few years, and I know at first hand, as you can imagine, exactly the difficulties and the effort that's gone in to getting to the point that we are at now, where we are going to have a brand new school. And I think residents of the new developments that are taking place at Eastleek can feel delighted that not only are they going to have a local school, but they're going to have a local school that is going to be run by the Spencer Academy Trust, which has a very high reputation across the East Midlands. So they're not only going to get a brand new school, but they're going to get a first-rate education as well. And that certainly is something to be celebrated this morning. And it seems a pity that we might appear to be nitpicking, but I don't think we are nitpicking in our concerns, because yes, residents want a new school for their children, but they also want to be able to enjoy their own properties, and they don't want to have the disruption that often living close to a school can cause. And we as elected members know only too well the problems that are caused because we get residents in our own divisions getting on to us almost daily about the issues, the traffic issues outside and near to schools. And so it seems a pity that when we've got a brand new school in the planning at this stage, that we can't eliminate some of those problems that we know are going to arise. And I do think that's a pity. And I don't think we have necessarily been listened to as a committee in the deliberations that we had some months ago now, when we expressed our concerns about this. It really is not satisfactory to have under provision of car parking on site. And I think that is what there is proposed, an under provision. Councillor Adams was quite right when he says, well, can you tell us how it's going to operate, who's going to be coming, and when are they going to go? You can't constrain a school. You can't constrain a school in the way it operates. But if there was going to be plenty of parking on site, then it wouldn't matter when the dinner ladies, or midday supervisors as they should be correctly called now, arrive on site, or when the cleaning staff, I don't know whether they've got some new grandiose title, used to be the caretaker in my day, the cleaning staff arrive, when the supervisors go, the kitchen staff come, and when they go. If there was plenty of parking on site, that would be completely irrelevant. And I note that we're told that there are going to be 50 staff employed, 21 of which are going to be full-time, which means you've only got 9 spare places, because the chances are that all of those full-time staff are going to come from outside the area. Certainly in my day, I wouldn't have wanted to have lived in the area where I taught, and I don't think the pupils would have wanted me to live there either, which is perhaps more to the point. So I think you can rest assured that the full-time staff are going to come from outside. And it's no good saying, as we heard this morning, but the midday supervisors and the cleaners, they're all going to be local and therefore they'll walk if they don't cycle. Well, you can't guarantee that at all. There's no way you can guarantee that, or can you legislate? So really, we want additional car parking spaces on site. And I come back once again, Chairman, to the issue of the private drives. I think we should include the traffic regulation order in that. I can't quite make out from the plans exactly the length of time that the traffic regulation orders are going to operate from. On the printing, I don't think is very good, and so it would be useful. Are we going to have that operating all day, or are we just going to have them where it's proposed operating at drop-off and pick-up time? Because that is what is usually done, apart from the zigzag lines and junctions, corners where you do get double yellow lines. So, as I say, there's much to celebrate, but for goodness sake, let's get it right instead of coming up with this drivel all the time that parents need to be discouraged from bringing their children to school in cars. They're not going to be discouraged. There may be petrol and diesel cars now. There'll be electric cars in the future. They won't be discouraged. We need to make appropriate provision and recognise that is what they are going to do. And no matter how many sentences you put in a report to say they shouldn't be doing this or they won't be doing this, perhaps we could encourage them and discourage them. They will do it. So get that into your heads when you're coming up with proposals. Yeah, we've got to support it, but we can improve on this, Chairman, and I hope the recommendations are modified to improve.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. I think if my specs and eyesight are right, the times on those regulation orders are 8:30 to 4:30. I think that's what it says, but we'll get confirmation or clarification on that. Councillor Helen Ann Smith, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I actually agree with Councillor Owen on a lot of those points. I've got some big concerns around the size of the car park. I think 50 staff car park for 34 if you include the disabled and electric parking. I don't think that's enough. I think I've got some concerns that we've got information within the report that's based on assumptions, that's not based on facts. I like facts. I don't like assumptions. And if they are going to be assumptions, tell me that they're assumptions. So I have got some concerns around that within the report. But we're talking about the midday supervisors, catering staff, and that it's okay because in other schools they've got a similar car park, it's fine, it's not a problem. Well, I know someone that's a midday supervisor at a primary school in Mansfield that's got a small car park, and their midday supervisor staff are told that they're not allowed to park in the staff car park. They have to park on nearby streets. So that's putting pressure on the local road infrastructure. So I've got concerns around that again, we're using assumptions. I think the fact that, we're looking at a new school is absolutely brilliant. But I think we need to make sure that we get it right. And I'm not trying to take away from the fact that we're looking at a new school. I'm not trying to take anything away from the fact that, this is a great opportunity for children in the local area to have a brilliant education. But we just need to get it right in the first place. And the other point I wanted to come on to, Chairman, is around the solar panels. And I appreciate the comments around the expense of them initially. But with energy prices going the way they are at the moment, surely the initial capital outlay will be more beneficial than the ongoing revenue expenditure. So they're my points on this, but I have got some very serious concerns around the parking within the application site and the infrastructure on the road highway that could have a negative impact on that from the parking within the site. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Helen Ann Smith. Yeah, it's. I mean, we all know that schools, old and new, have the same problem with car. Let's face it, everyone everywhere does, and we all have issues in our own areas. But times have moved on, and don't we have to, whatever your views about climate change and all the rest of it, policies are in place that, whether we know they're going to be followed or not, the jury is out, but to discourage people using cars. And if you only have to look at paragraph 109, which refers to measures making it easier for more convenient for car users to access and drop off, encourages car usage, and it also refers to it being sort of against national policies and indeed this authority's policies that only a year ago notified a climate change. And as part of that decision, all committees, including this one, have to keep in mind the commitment that this authority has made to climate change. So it's a difficult balancing act, and I understand completely where you're coming from. I will let you come back briefly, yes.
Yeah, if I can just come back on that, Chair. I do appreciate what you're saying, and I fully support that. But from Councillor Owen said that when he was actively working, he didn't want necessarily, not want is the wrong term, but he didn't want to work where he lived. And I've got a couple of friends that are teachers, and neither of those live anywhere near the schools where they teach. And when they first became qualified, other teachers actually advised them not to teach in areas where they lived. So if you actually speak to a lot of teachers, they don't live where they teach because they want to keep that degree of separation. So you are always going to have that problem of people, especially members of staff, driving to school because they want that separation from personal life and work life.
Understood. Councillor Sam Smith and then Councillor Adams. So Councillor Sam Smith, please.
Thank you, Chairman. And I find these committee meetings are always difficult to speak after Councillor Owen because he talks so much sense, common sense, and I find myself agreeing with most of what he says, and it's things that I plan to mention myself, so I'm going to put my hand up quicker next time to get in before him. I totally welcome this new school. I've worked directly with Marion Clay, who quite rightly has received a lot of plaudits for getting us to where we are, and I think the divisional member in Councillor Barney as well filled my inbox more than I think residents have in the past few weeks about parking outside schools in his aim to get this delivered. So I think the new school's great, but I make no apology at all for focusing my comments on parking, which Councillor Helen Ann Smith and those previously have spoken about. I think if you look at paragraph 112, we're cheering and celebrating the fact that the highway is 6.75 metres wide, and that will be appropriate for double parking on both sides. But I asked the question earlier on a clarification. There's driveways on that road. So what we're saying to those residents who are going to buy those houses in the future, because they're not there at the moment, is we've made your highway wider. Well, we're saying to the parents now that highway's wide enough for you to park there. But then when they sell the houses in a few years' time or whenever they come on board, by the way, your driveway might be blocked. We're in control of this. Let's get a condition in this planning permission to put double yellow lines outside those houses. Let's put a condition in to help the residents, because Councillor Barney's inbox will be full in a few years' time with these people not being able to get out their driveway. And guess what? It will come back to the Highways Committee or whoever, the Cabinet member then, and it will cost this authority far much more money than it would to get it in now. Why isn't it in now? Let's get it in there. I also want to make reference to paragraph 127. The times have been clarified on the condition for Sheepwash Way. Look, I've been on the site with Councillor Barney. Sheepwash Way definitely needs conditions in there for parking because it's a temporary access to the school at the moment, and we don't want families to get used to dropping their children off there when the new access opens. So it is absolutely right that we put some kind of condition in there. I don't think, however, it's right that we put restricted parking 8:30 till 4:30. Those houses exist at the moment. There are residents living there at the moment. Why can't we change that to a permit scheme? Because the detrimental impact it will have on those residents there at the moment is you can't have deliveries to your house because they could get done. They can't have visitors because you could get a ticket. But by the way, we as an authority are making that decision, because what looks like is we've picked a site for a school and now we're sticking plasters on every other issue it's caused to mitigate our decision as an authority to put the school there. So the 2 points is, can we get double yellow lines as a condition for the driveways on Plan 4, I think it is, and can we change the TRO to a permit scheme to the benefit of the residents?
Thank you, Councillor Smith, and thank you for the 2 direct questions as well. That's which we will note have been taken, and we will be responded to shortly.
Chair, I was wondering if it would be helpful for you and the committee if there are a couple of legal points which just about the constraints of the site, and also the traffic regulation orders which members have raised.
I think that would be helpful, yes please. So who will give those? Would it be yourself or one of the...
Well, first of all, I know that we do obviously have representatives from the applicant, from the County Council and from ARC as well, who may be able to answer some of these questions. But I think, I suppose the basic principle in terms of size of the car park is this site has been given through, the need for it's arisen from the housing which has been built in Eastleigh. There's the Persimmon and David Wilson Homes developments. The 2 pieces of land which were given through Section 106 agreements, legal agreements for this school. So first of all, the actual size of the site, Chair just wants to explain that is constrained, the size of the site. Then, when a new school is built, it must meet certain requirements for the Department for Education has certain specifications and standards for new schools, certain size of certain spaces and playing fields and outside areas, which perhaps ARC or Mrs. Clay may be able to confirm that's the case. So it was just to make the point that there are those constraints when dealing with it. It's not kind of a blank canvas, as it were. We have to work within the parameters, and so officers and ARC, when designing a school, will have to take that into account. The second thing, coming to the traffic regulation orders, the Highways Authority has the power under the Road Traffic Act 1984 to make road traffic orders on roads in their area. Now, usually a road is an adopted highway, but it should be roads that they can control. I understand, I think there was a case recently concerning Isle of Wight Council where it was held in the High Court that a private road could be a road for the purposes of the Road Traffic Act, and so it could, road traffic orders could be made. But in that case, it was a road, I understand. I think the expression used was that that it must be a road that the public has access or tolerated access, but it must be with agreement with the landowners. So I think in this case, I think the roads in question, I understand, Mr. Marsh, perhaps you will confirm that they are going to be adopted as public highway.
The roads on the highway network, so Evans Road would be, the main carriageway would be part of the adopted highway, but not the private drives serving groups of properties.
Okay. Well, I think in that case, but certainly for the roads which are going to be adopted, then traffic regulation orders can be made, and that is what is proposed. But for the private drives, it would have to be with the agreement of those private owners. I think it boils down to enforceability, really, and I think as these roads, the development is still being built out. I think it's not the case as it was in the recent High Court decision, where it was a private road which had been used for some time, which the public had access over for some time, which is why it was held to be a road rather than a relatively new road. Anyway, thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you. Well, I've got two more speakers on this. I'm tempted to, and I will come back to officers for comments and suggestions, and so we can hopefully reach an agreement on this. But there's plenty mulling over here, but I think everyone is getting the message as to what the big concerns here are. So, Councillor Adams, then Councillor Camilleri, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so again, I mean, referring back to the enthusiasm of having a new school, I mean, it's fantastic that we're investing in new schools. And, you know, as you rightly pointed out, we can't miss that factor that we're investing in that local community and attempting to improve things, which is fantastic. We do, from this perspective, sit here as our residents collectively. And when we sit here and talk openly in committee, this is from the feedback of arguably, in some case, in my own case, 6 years, but in many other councillors, many, many years of experience. And fundamentally, the biggest complaints we get around schools are safety outside of a school, personally, is what I've had, but also, as we've discussed already, this parking situation. It's a worry because it not only, you know, as I said, as everyone's pointed out, it does affect inboxes, and you know, it's not just about that, but it affects people's lives as they live their lives. You know, when they're trying to enjoy times at home with their families, or whatever that may be. I've not, as a councillor, when I've seen previous, and obviously this is new to me, sat here, but when I've watched previous planning applications for new businesses, I've always seen operating hours. I've always seen times of operation. I've always seen a plan as to, like I was mentioning before, an arrival and an exit of certain people to substantiate the view that 30 spaces is ample. They've always had to prove that when I've seen planning applications before. But like I say, I'm not seeing that here today. I think environmentally, there's an interesting point. I love the fact we've got air source heat pumps coming into this school. I think that's a fantastic move forward. And I love to hear about the fact you're using the heated air and reclaiming that and reusing that air. But I still think we've missed a trick. And Councillor Barney points out that there may be some optional funding that he can access, which would be, for me, the finishing point. Because it's all very well having air source heat pumps, but air source heat pumps use electricity. We've seen energy costs, as Councillor Smith pointed out, rising exponentially recently. And to not account for that at this stage seems odd to me. I can't feel that I would ever think about doing a new installation of a business or even a home without putting solar on it now if I could afford to do so. Because, as Councillor Smith rightly pointed out, it also mitigates the ongoing costs. But also would provide an educational tool also for those children to really understand how it works. You know, and that those solar panels on your roof with an air source heat pump can take you off grid. That's the point. And that's really where we should all be heading in the future of property development. And simultaneously with this as well, I think that there's a slight other thing that maybe I wish we could have gone into, and that was into rainwater harvesting as well. Something that substantially reduces the expelling of water from buildings into not only the natural landscape, but also down into the sewage system, which, as we know, can put pressure on our waterways. Whereas if we use rainwater harvesting, we capture that, it only goes down the drain once. So again, we're reducing our environmental impact, which for me is not just about power. I'm really glad to see we've got hedgehog highways in here. Hedgehogs are a big favourite of mine. I absolutely love the little guys. They're so cute, aren't they? But that aside, I'm not going to get into beavers because it's a different sort of location. But the bat boxes as well, and the bird boxes, and also the don't start, the hibernaculum as well. I'm really glad to see those in place. I think really, and I echo what Councillor Owen said about this. You know, we just want to grab it, and also Councillor Smith. We just want to grab it and get this right, because, you know, in education, what you're effectively saying to people, in my view, is that this is how we should be doing it. You know, we're teaching the future people that will sit here and do the roles that we're doing now, how to how to operate, how to live their lives. Now, if we're getting it right in schools and we're showing them in schools, they're coming home to their parents, they're talking about how we did at school. This is right, this is great, we did, and that enthusiasm can pass on through those children to their parents. And if we get it right here, we get it right now in the school that they go to every single day and their parents can see that, it's a massive opportunity to really show what we can do in this county to improve the environment, not only for present, but also in the future. And just my closing point on car parking is just to bring in, we do want to reduce the use of cars, petrol, hydrocarbon cars, but we want to increase the use of EVs. So we're still going to have those vehicles on the ground. I suppose what I'm asking is, if we could increase those car parking spaces, surely, as we are in the quarry, we can reclaim that land back to grass once those car parks are no longer being used for cars to park on. Surely we can do that. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, reclaiming sort of land from car parks, I would suggest is something it's not for today, it might happen in future years. Councillor Camilleri finally, and then we'll go into the officers.
Well, I'd like to thank Councillor Barney, because it sounds a wonderful project. I'm sure it is, and it really is needed around there. But as you know, this is one of my pet hates, parking around schools. We had a motion at council to propose that any new schools, this would be considered before anything else. Because it's all right, it's talking here about how good things are, but if you're a resident living outside one of these schools, your life is a misery. It ruins their, and we're not talking about one resident, you might be talking about 30, 40 people whose lives are blighted by this. You can put as many traffic orders as you want on. You can put as many yellow lines. You can put what you want. But where those kids, when they drive up in the four-wheel drives outside the schools, they'll get to close as they can to the schools, wait there, drop off, pick up, and they do not care about anybody. So whatever you do now is too late. They're not going to take any notice. I can guarantee you that. And what I would like to add, that you put the traffic orders on. You try and get them, get a policeman around there or a traffic bobby or to actually police it. They're a waste of time, really. So all I'm saying is, yeah, we need new schools. We need all this, but we need to plan this. What you need to do is say, right, we're going to have trouble with traffic. How are we going to move the school, make it better so we don't have this problem with planning committees again? That is a must. And that's why I like this kind of debate. It's making you lot know that we're not happy. We want the new schools, but we're not happy about you blighting our residents' lives, because that's what you do. When you do that, that's their life. They're fed up every time at 3 o'clock. They know they're going to get blocked off or going to get upset. So all I'm saying is, can't change it on this one. And it looks like a brilliant school map. It's a beautiful school in a beautiful position. But let's try and make it better for our residents next time. Plan the residents first. Residents first, children, traffic. Do it in a proper, so we get a nice, so we can all live together. And that's what I'd like to see. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
And very clear indeed, Councillor Camilleri. Now, and again, I didn't see Councillor Henshaw's hand from where I'm sitting. Councillor Henshaw.
Thanks, Chair, for bringing me in. Obviously, I think the main problem with this application is that we're trying, in imperial speak, we're trying to get a quart into a pint pot, or in metric, putting a 2 litre into a half litre pot. But in saying that, we've all highlighted the problems in relation to the size, in relation to the parking, in relation to the undoubted problems that the residents will get in and around that area, because we all know that will happen. So to mitigate any future problems, and I agree Councillor Barney's inbox may well in the future be inundated with complaints and people wanting him to do something in relation to the antisocial parking that will occur. But in saying that, we have a commitment to provide schools. We have a commitment to provide education to the children of Nottinghamshire. And I think this school, in its when it's completed, will be able to provide a first-class education for people. In saying that, I always believe, and I know Councillor Camilleri has been a little bit critical of officers, ultimately the decision is the members. The members will make the decision. The officers provide professional advice for us to consider. So at the end of the day, I listen to officers, I take their points on board, and at the end of the day, I as a member have the responsibility to make the decision in relation to any planning application that comes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henshaw. You actually took a lot of words out of my mouth there. So you saved me from saying it, saying a lot of those very obvious and very factual points. That we are here to make a decision, and we have to look at the bigger picture. And yes, a lot of discussion has gone on about particular aspects, the car parking issues, but we have to look at the bigger picture and hopefully get the mix right. And as you've said as well, that one day in the future, and nothing stays the same forever, does it? So as time goes on, whatever we finish up with, things will change in future years. Just one thing to come back to Councillor Camilleri about the policing of parking outside schools. I'm sure that most of us have seen the camera cars that go round, and I've seen them in my area, and I'm sure most people have seen them in theirs. I think there's 2 or 3 of these now covering Nottinghamshire that do actually fine people if they have parked in a way that they should not be parking outside schools. So we've had a lot of discussion and debate. Yes. Yes.
And I didn't criticise the officers. I never criticised. I think they do a brilliant job. But we actually have the vision. We are the members. It's us. If we feel that our residents need protecting and making policies that protect them, and at the same time have excellent schools, then that's what we're going to do. We're not going to go, well, you know, that's our job. Sorry.
Understood completely, Councillor Camilleri, and I think the point that Councillor Henshaw was picking up on was a particular phrase you used. I think you said something like "you lot," and that I don't think is particularly appropriate to use. So lesson learnt on that. Briefly, Councillor Adams. Briefly.
It's just a microcosm on the. What you were talking about the lines outside schools. It's the zigzag lines only, or bus stop yellow lines that are controlled by the camera car.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Double yellows are done by parking enforcement. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Right, so lock on there. Who's going to come back? Who's got the delight of starting off? Is it you, Mr. Marsh? But I will be very happy if other colleagues from Highways would like to. And indeed, the applicants would like to come back on this. I'm happy for that, to support you.
Thank you. Well, there's quite a lot to cover there, and please remind me if there are any points which I missed. But I mean, first of all, just going back to the initial starting point, the County Council, or the applicant as the County Council, are given some quite challenging sites. They come out of housing applications which are dealt with at the district by the district council, so the districts know where these school sites are going to be. By the time these sites come to the county council, the housing layouts have pretty much been sorted out that are going to be close to the schools. I think there is the opportunity for the districts to consider, because they know where these schools are going to be, the housing layout and the residents who are going to be impacted by what, as you say, we all know happens at schools. School parking's divided into 2 sorts. There's operational parking, accommodation of to be accommodated on site, and then there is the parent drop-off and pick-up. On this, sites which the county council do tend to be challenging. This one is no exception. The fact that it's on 2 sites rather than 1 complete site, it doesn't help. It also has some level issues on the school building site, and The car park, I think you may find might be difficult to expand, but it has been taken in deciding on the size of that car park. That has been based on the highway assessment which the applicant's undertaken and has been considered by Highways Development Control. In terms of traffic regulation orders, on Sheepwash Way itself, there is already a traffic regulation order which is about to go out to consultation because it's required for the temporary school. As with all traffic regulation orders, it will go through separate process. So what we're looking at here is the principle of that traffic regulation order, and condition 23 isn't saying this, the diagram which was shown on the slide is what is actually proposed. It calls for a traffic regulation order or school zone in its broader sense to be generally in accordance with what's shown on that on that plan, but we can take on board the points raised, Councillor Smith, and incorporate any suggested changes into that. There won't be any residents to consult as such because there are no residents there, but it will be something at this stage which will need to be done in with the agreement of the house builder, so we can pick up on the points which have been suggested in looking at the traffic regulation order on Evans Road.
Just while you're looking in that, I think that's probably a result, but I think that helps satisfy the points you raised there about the traffic regulations order. Are you quite happy with that?
Just to clarify, there are residents on Sheepwash Way, and the TRO proposed is the timing Monday to Friday 8:30 till 4:30, and my question was, can we change that for permit parking? Because if you do the 8:30 till 4:30 no parking, you're actually impacting the residents who are already there. They can't have visitors, they can't have deliveries, things like that. So if we could change the condition to change that to permit parking, obviously subject to consultation.
As I understand it, there are charges for residents for permit parking schemes. The traffic regulation order, when it goes out to consultation, is subject to a separate statutory process, and residents, in the case of Sheepwash Way, because they are already there, will have the opportunity to make comments on that. But that will be a consultation which will be carried out by VIA on the making of the traffic regulation order for the 120 place temporary school opening in September. So that consultation is about to start. In terms of the timings on plates, as I understand it, there are two standard timings which are used. One is for morning and afternoon. The other is one which is continuous throughout the day. The residents would have the opportunity to make comment on that.
So the opportunity is there, the consultation. Councillor Helen Ansmith.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. That was what I was going to say, actually, that I was going to put an alternative recommendation because of the fact that residents would have to pay for parking permits, you have to pay for visitors' parking permits, so it restricts them, would be to change those times on that. I know it's something that's done quite a lot in the cities and in London especially. There's a lot of areas around schools that have got specific times, so you can't park between 8 and 9, or I think it was 2 and 4 or something along those lines. So I think that in this instance would be a much better approach rather than the parking permits. Sorry to jump in, but I just thought...
That's fine, and I think the general consensus would be permits are an absolute last resort. So sorry, Mr. Marsh, I interrupted them, but I thought it was important because you'd come to a natural break there, and you picked up on those important points. So back to you again. So, well, do we want to say anything about the points made about the heating and the heat pumps, for example?
Well, I mean, there are lots of features which can be incorporated within schemes. Councillor Adams mentioned quite a list of things which could be incorporated. A lot of features are incorporated in it, and in terms of determining the planning application, we have to be satisfied that they are attaining an appropriate level in terms of the sustainable credentials of the building. I'm sure there will always be opportunities to add more and more to it, but the applicant has explained that they are working and are constrained by a budget. But we would support the provision of additional sustainable features within any development.
Thank you. And again, as we said earlier on, it's rather like maintenance of a building and upgrading things as time goes on. Technology changes, doesn't it? And for all we know, there may be some other technology coming along in the future that we don't know about yet that could be used one day in the school. Are there any other points you want to come back on?
Well, Councillor Adams mentioned about EV charging. That there is EV charging proposed for 4 spaces, including 2 EV charging spaces for disability parking. But within the rest of the development, as part of the car park construction, the ducting is being put in to allow future provision to all of the parking spaces. So it's, I suppose, forward planning in that respect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, have I interrupted? Do you want
No.
No. So now there was you've mentioned as well amending some of the existing conditions in there. Would it be helpful just to remind us what those amendments are, so members are clear, please?
So within condition 3, there are recommended approved conditions, approved drawings, which are itemised in A to X. We have had some revisions to drawings which are for drawings 3M through to 3S. We've had revised drawing numbers come in, so there are changes which are slight tweaks to drawings. There aren't material changes there, but it's a case of bringing that to the attention of members in terms of if should the resolve to approve the application, it would be with those latest drawings which we'll be looking to approve. In condition 24, there is a reference back to the condition 3M, so that condition would also be revised to revision P06. And then in condition 10, when that has been, for some reason, Microsoft Word has grabbed a hold of it, and rather than actually beginning with 1, it has begun with H in the wording of the condition on condition 10. And then yes, so it should be Roman numeral 1, but it begins with H in the published papers. And then in Roman numeral 7, within that, what we are suggesting is that in the 4th line, that in addition, after the word trees on the 4th line of 7, it should be trees and hedges. Trees or hedges, sorry. Added to the text there. And then we're also recommending an additional note be added, and that is to encourage that liaison, as on the screen there.
Now, can we all see that additional note? Can you read what it says from where you're sitting? Because I think it covers a lot of the concerns that we have, and that is liaising with the members of Rushcliffe and the East Street Parish Council, actively improve options for sustainable travel and development school travel plan. Now, it does refer to the temporary schools in use, but I think there is no doubt whatsoever that there is a wish and a desire of the committee that this applies to the permanent school as well. Councillor Creamer.
me, I thought I'd hit it. We make the rightful assumption that the county council is involved with it, but it doesn't actually say. It just says Rushcliffe councils and parish. And town council and East Leek. Just for clarification, the county council as well.
Would anyone have any objection to inserting county council into that as well? I think that's a very sensible idea, so it shows that as many bodies as possible are involved in these discussions. I think that would help. Yep. Okay. Right. Anything else to add on that, or has that? It's very unusual. I mean, it's a big application, and we have to make a decision. So, Councillor Adams, you're looking at me again as if you're getting agitated. You are new to this committee, so I will give you a certain amount of leeway.
It's because I'm new.
Very unusual.
Sorry, it's because I'm new, Chair.
I'm not going to let you bring any new item in on this.
No,
so
it's not. It's just referring back.
Just a clarification.
Yeah, it was just the operating hours point, that was all. I just wondered if there was any way that could be placed within the document somewhere to show when those changeovers were happening, as far as staff was concerned.
Could there be some sort of advisory in that connection? Not a condition as such, but an advisory for somehow to allow for want of a better word, the crossover of staff coming and going. Is there any way around that, do you think?
Sorry, I'm just wondering, Chair. Sorry, I was just going to say that the school, it will be an academy, and so there will be an agreement. It will be run by the Academy Trust. There will be an agreement between the County Council and the Academy Trust. But the operational matters, the day-to-day running of the school will be dealt with by the Academy Trust.
So perhaps it could well be that the trust, who I'm not sure if they're here today, but they certainly will get to hear about the observations that have been made. Could that be an advisory or some sort of communication with the trust? Does it work like that?
I think we probably could have some sort of advisory to basically ask, to highlight the concerns of members and that, to encourage the school to, manage staff parking as beneficially as possible to, minimise the amount of parking on the highway. Even though it's going to be an academy, the permission will stay with the land, so it will be for the academy to operate the school in accordance with the permission.
It's in the spirit of good old working in partnership between the authorities, the members, the residents and the academy. This is everyone's interest, isn't it, to hopefully be good neighbours and at the end of the day try and keep everyone as happy as possible. So if we could have some sort of advisory in that, perhaps that would be a...
We'll draft something up and let you and Councillor
Would that be... Are you happy with that?
That's perfect. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we've had a big discussion on this, and it is important because all planning applications are important, but especially a school and especially the very serious points that we have raised today. And I make no apology the fact this has taken quite a long time, but we are here to discuss these things and to try and get a better understanding and hopefully reach agreement. So, with that in mind, there's no other legal points we want to make, Mrs. Clark, are there? No. So I think we need to make a decision now, and everyone has been listening and taking frantic notes. Show of hands, please. Those in favour of the application? Okay, thank you. Is anyone against? And are there any abstentions? Right, so do we need to count those up again then? So hands up those in favour, just for the record. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think that's 10, isn't it? And there were no objections, and abstentions was 3 abstentions. So permission is granted as per the report, but also the modification or the amendments to the recommendations, and also with the advisory notes, and very, very strong messages being given from this committee to all involved. I'm sure everyone has. So thank you for your patience with that. So we move on now to the next item on the agenda, which is a report on planning and monitoring and enforcement for 2020 to 21 and 2021 to 2022. I'll formally move the recommendation on page 261. Councillor Creamer.
Formally second.
Thank you very much. Mr. Turner, you've been extremely patient, so thank you for that. And so over to you to talk to us about enforcement.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be relatively brief to help you along. This is a report to members to update them on the monitoring and enforcement work which has been carried out during the financial years 2020 to 21 and 21 to 22. The COVID-19 pandemic had a significant influence on the work we were doing and resulted in a reduction in the number of routine inspections. However, these have been carried out where possible in that period, particularly given the fact that the waste industry in particular was a key sector and didn't stop in that period. The pandemic, in terms of waste, resulted in a significant change in waste streams, with us all eating from home rather than going out. So there were some changes to the way that was managed in that period, but things are now beginning to revert back to normal. In terms of the quarrying side of things, which is also something we monitor, those were temporarily suspended, but then were brought back in after a reasonably short period of time to support the reintroduction of the building sector, and so on. Throughout the whole period, complaint investigation continued uninterrupted. During the year 2020 to 2021, we carried out a total of 368 site inspections. That's a reduction on the previous year, which was 401. Of these, 350 related to county matter development, and of those visits, 121 were made to county matter sites where fees are chargeable under the town and country planning regime, generating an income of £48,307, which was down from the previous year of £67,490. In terms of complaints and notices served during the first of the years, 2020 to 2021, there were served 7 enforcement notices relating to 3 separate unauthorised development sites, and I'll comment to those shortly. A total of 11 planning contravention notices were served during this report period as part of investigations into alleged breaches of planning control. And a total of 76 complaints were received and investigated, of which 92%, 70, of the complainants were notified of progress within 15 days. During the report period 2021 to 22, a total of 379 inspections were carried out, a similar number to the previous year. Of these, 340 related to county matter development, and of those visits, 138 were made to county matter sites under the town and country planning pleas regime, generating an income of £54,786, a slight increase on the 2020 period. During the report period for 2021 to 22, 1 enforcement notice was served, and again I'll come on to that in my next section. A total of 14 planning contravention notices were served as part of investigations into alleged breaches of planning control. A total of 53 complaints were received and investigated, of which 89% of complainants were updated of progress within 15 days. So now come on to a resume of the enforcement notices which were served in the report period. The first ones relate to a place called Barn Farm in Connaughton. Barn Farm was subject to enforcement action a number of years ago in relation to some minor waste development. In 2020, we received further allegations that waste materials were being brought onto the land at the farm. It's quite an extensive farm holding, coming to about 150 hectares. The operator and owner of the farm has been bringing in waste materials and depositing them around the farm. It was also alleged that various trenches and such were being excavated and waste materials tipped into them. So on the back of that, we chose to serve 5 separate notices, which covered various parcels of land on the farm. The photograph here gives an indication of the site when we went there. As you can see, that's a substantial field. There's a 360 excavator in the middle of the shot, so to give you some idea of scale. And there were various trenches and excavations around the site, which we were told were for either the removal of an existing roadway, which potentially might have been the case, and also for drainage works. The notice requires the cessation of the importation of waste materials, and for those which are on the farm either to be removed or used as part of general permitted development works which a farmer has to do. Namely, that would be in the repair and formation of roadways or in the base of buildings. Second picture again, Jonathan. This is a second picture from above. Oh, we've gone through two. So in terms of the site itself then, at Barn Farm, works are progressing and he is gradually clearing the site up. It's very difficult to pin him down in terms of what actually isn't taking place. But so we're trying to visit him on a regular basis to keep an eye on that. The second site relates to a place called Markham Moor, just off the A1. A significant quantity of waste material was imported, and this was used to form two large bunds on the property. The pictures that don't really show the scale. This is the bund towards the front of the site, which had been tipped in an area of low-lying land, which is shown on the maps for the area to be an area subject to surface water flooding and providing attenuation. Despite the fact that the landowner was claiming it was being done to address flooding, it was compounding matters. A second bund was subsequently formed on a field to the rear, that bund being approximately 250 metres long by 80 metres on an L shape and about 3 metres high, allegedly for some form of agricultural experiment. The notices were served requiring these to be removed. Those notices were scheduled to be complied with as of July 2021. Works hadn't commenced by that date, but however, works following discussions with them did commence in November of 2021, although they stopped a couple of weeks into that. We've been pursuing them since then, and we have still to get any further progress on that, and the matter now will be escalated. These pictures show the site now showing a limited amount of removal which has taken place. So I'll bring an update onto that when we have a future one. The third site is a place called Oxton Road in Southall. We were in receipt of complaints alleging that waste materials were being imported to the site and burned. When we appeared at the site, there's a building on the right-hand side which was full of white goods and other large items of stable, and a series of 6 pits had been excavated, into which a number of them waste material had been tipped. Some of that was being burnt. So if you go for the next one. So effectively the company were avoiding the waste system, just bringing in waste, tipping it to these holes and burning them. So notices were served on the landowners and interested parties there. That brought about a cessation to the importation of material. The items stored within the barn, the white goods, were removed, and the waste within the pits was removed, and they were backfilled and restored following that, which hopefully we'll see in the next photograph. So that's the site now that shows the material replaced back into those voids. We believe this operation has been carried out elsewhere, but we haven't yet managed to pin down exactly where that was. The final one is a place called Top Farm in Barton in Fabus, where we received reports that waste materials were being imported and deposited. Having been to the site, we found out that a range of materials were being imported to extend an area of land and raise the level on the farm. It appears to be going on for many years and probably started initially as part of an area on the farm where they deposited material they no longer needed, but it appears they lent it into a contract with a third party. The majority of the material brought in is inert. However, within those materials there are plastics, waste, oil drums, etc. So a notice was served requiring that to be removed. That notice has now taken effect and works are now slowly progressing to do that work. What they're doing to expedite the process is some of the material is being used, the hardcore that comes out for agricultural repairs, which they can do under Part 6 of the General Permitted Development Order, and some of the clean soils are being used for soil improvement. But also a large amount is heading off to an appropriate waste disposal facility. And briefly, an update on notices which were reported to members from a previous report. One was land at Cocket Lane in Farnsfield, which was lying in open countryside and was used for an aggregate waste recycling facility. Those notices were served back in 2019 and 2020, along with accompanying stop notices, as the service of the notice didn't bring about cessation. The notices were appealed. The appeal was subsequently withdrawn, and the notice has now been complied with the waste materials all now being removed, and the majority of the site returned back to agriculture. The third one is an update on a company called Knots Recycling Limited in Shire Oaks Road in Worksop. The photograph there shows the site in effectively the rectangle you can see. Back in 2013, a company operating the site stored material outside in breach of planning control. Not long after we served the notices, there were a number of significant fires on the site, which resulted in the company going into liquidation. The land was then held with the liquidation company and was finally sold on to another party a few years ago, and we've now been in discussions with them to secure the clearance of the site, the removal of the waste, and they have intentions to redevelop it. The back of the site now, probably about a third of the material has now been removed. This area of the site was picked on to be removed first because this is where we've had ongoing issues with fires. So hopefully that issue has now been resolved. And I'm hoping to see that work progress over the summer and hopefully with clearance towards the end of the year. And finally, there's another site which I haven't got any photographs for. It's just up the road from there called Shire Oaks Road, Sandy Lane in Worksop, where a large waste transfer station was filled within a period of 6 weeks with waste materials, and the company went into liquidation. The land is still now held by the Crown in escheat, so there's not a great deal that can go on there, so unfortunately there's been no further progress on that. So that's a brief outline of the work we've done in those periods.
Thank you very much, Mr. Turner. It's quite fascinating at times, actually, and I can see you've been out with your drone as well, taking photographs. Does anyone have any questions or comments on this, please? No. I mean, what I would say is that I know that whatever life we're in, council life or whatever, there's a lot of comment out there now talking about the pandemic excuse for things not happening and being delayed and all the rest of it. Well, I have to say that, okay, the numbers are a little bit down, which is not surprising, but the fact is the enforcement team, it's not many of you, but was busy working, and you could see from the report that despite all the challenges we were all facing in life with the pandemic and everything, we were responding to complaints and investigating and getting results. So I think that really should be recognised, and because it's not an easy job even at the best of times in the world of enforcement. So no comments, other comments or queries on that. So I think we just have to note this one, don't we? So we just go to the vote on this. All those happy to receive the report, please show. And I think that's unanimous. No one against, and no abstentions. So thank you again, Mr. Turner. And then finally, we just go on to the routine Development Management Progress Report. I'll move the recommendations which are on page 276. Councillor Creamer.
Formally second, Chair.
Thank you. And Mr. Smith again, please.
I'll be very brief, Chair. This is the usual paper we get to committee, just setting out the decisions that have been made since last committee and the applications that we've received. And there's obviously the forward planner at Appendix 2 showing matters, applications that are due to come to committee in the near future. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from anyone? Just an observation that we have a busy meeting ahead of us in July, so we need to be prepared for that. So thank you. I need to vote on this. Do I need to vote? No, we don't. And just a couple of other things I'll mention, just for information. We are the Planning and Rights of Way Committee. And obviously much of our time is taken up as today with planning applications, but every now and again there will be rights of way decisions we have to take as well. And rather like planning, where you have to have been trained and to be registered as being trained for planning, the same applies to rights of way. And I understand that, I can't remember who told me, but somebody told me that not all members may necessarily have received the rights of way training at this stage.
Sorry, Chair, I think it's even more precise than that, because the training that we're proposing, because there'll be a report in July on this subject, is town and village green. So there's specific town and village green training on top of the rights of way training that you had. So I think some members may well have had the town and village green training as well, but I think a lot of people at the very least will need a refreshing, and I think most people would need the training. So we will be in touch about arranging that before the next meeting in July.
So what I'm strongly advising and requesting and advising is that you could... Oh, sorry, yes, Councillor Helen Smith.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to ask, will you be sending that out to all members, so members that aren't currently on the committee can do that training, so they are available to substitute for other members? Thank you.
Once again, a member has taken out a comment I was going to make as well. I was going to suggest that we open this up to all members because inevitably someone might need to stand in, and as you say. So expect to receive an invitation, and I look forward to everyone's positive responses and replies to that invitation, because we do appreciate the training, don't we? And and it's essential. We need it. We can't do it otherwise. And then finally, from me for now, just a general query about site visits. I know I keep going on about them. When we can do attend, have we had any more word from our friends at Mansfield Quarries following? Because they did say to us when we were there, you'll be very welcome to come along in the near future. Because I know that quite generally those of us who attended whenever it was a couple of months ago, it was eye-opening, interesting, and we were told, were we not, that we could go along again and see how it progresses. So if we could just chase that. With that, I don't think there's any other items. Thank you again for your input. I know it's been a little bit difficult this morning, but important decisions to take, and we'll close the meeting. Good grief, it's 1:05. So thank you, safe journeys.